This new memorial project has been an ongoing 3+ years, and it has been headed by a tenacious group of Monson people that I would like to recognize today. First, veterans William Emanuelson and Richard Marshall, Susan DeLoya, John Wentworth, who is on a plane to Paris this morning, the keeper of the lists and the president of the Monson Historical Society, Glenn Poole, and the two researchers that any town would be proud to have, Tut and Wayne Bennett. If you could give a round of applause, it's their work. This monument would also not exist if not for the help of other people of the town. First and foremost, my classmate, son of veteran Harold French and grandson of veteran Harold French, who gave us the base for the monument. Recognize, please, James French and Jim French. Stand up. Stand up. Steve Vinio is probably hiding, but without him, we would never have gotten this done. He did everything from lug pea stone to cut trees to whatever. So Steve, if you're here, let's recognize him. And two men, before that, all things slate. Many of you were disappointed this monument was not made of slate. We consulted with John Tacko on every move we made, and slate was not going to hold the amount of engraving that's on this piece of granite. So John Tacko has worked with us hand and foot to get this done. There will be a big piece of slate across the top of it, but it probably won't be there for another 3 or 4 months. But there is also another piece of slate on the property. So thanks to John, he tried, we just couldn't do it. And then two gentlemen who helped us envision the whole thing. Now, neither one of these guys are from Monson, but they both had the good sense to marry Monson women. So from Piscataquis Monument, Ethan Annis, who envisioned the stone for us, and Danny Rosebush, who sandblasted every name in. Thank you. And finally, support from our town government. We couldn't have done it without them. Daniel Swain, our former town manager, was the one who encouraged us and got us going on the project. And we reported to the select board all along the way, and they found a place for us to set the stone, and they also put a line item in the budget for the monument the past 2 years. So please vote at town meeting next week to pass the budget for this monument. But I'd like to recognize our select board. Eric Vinio is up here somewhere with the veterans. Right behind me. Oh, okay. Eric Vinio, Sue Chase, who is also a veteran, and Tyler Atkins. And our awesome interim town manager who helped us finish the project, Marty Gagne. And veteran Eric Vinio will bring us greetings from the town.
Greetings. The Monson municipal officers are honored to be part of today's dedication of the Monson Veterans Memorial Monument. We want to thank the Veterans Memorial Committee for their diligent work towards the planning, research, design, and fundraising of this monument. and all those people who made monetary contributions as well too directly. When viewing this monument and noting the many conflict periods that are noted on this monument and the service members that participated, it is truly a moment of reflection and pause with pride and respect to consider that so many of our town citizens have over so many generations supported and fought for our rights, liberties, and freedoms that we enjoy today. Each of these military service members are distinguished in their roles in the service to our country. Some in support roles, some as leaders, some in combat, some prisoners of war, some missing in action, and those that came home to live their lives with the effect of war, and those who gave the ultimate sacrifice to die for our country. And for those members that are with us still today, I want to say thank you for your service. And for those that are no longer with us, you will not be forgotten. Thank you.
Is Deb Kuchar here? Deb Kuchar? We're waiting for the State Legion Commander. She thought we were going to start at 12. So we're going to skip that and hope she shows up before we're done. I'd next like to introduce Estella Bennett. I cannot say enough about the research skills that this woman has. She's absolutely amazing, as is her husband. And she's going to talk about the Civil War piece.
Good afternoon. It's nice to see such a good crowd here. As the Senior Vice President of the State of Maine 10 Daughters of Union Veterans, I'd like to pass along regrets from Sally Sawyer, who is unable to attend today. She is our department president. I'd like to begin with a brief history of the Memorial Day and its meaning. Many places claim to be the beginning of Decoration Day, but most traditional origin begins in Columbus, Mississippi in the spring of 1866, when women decorated the graves of the Confederate soldiers who died at the Battle of Shiloh. 3 years later, the Grand Army of the Republic established a National Day of Remembrance. In May of 1882, northern states changed the Decoration Day to the name of Memorial Day. Memorial was traditionally May 30th until June of 1968, when the U.S. Congress changed it to the last day in May. A day to remember all of our veterans, and this year, for the first time in Monson, to have Civil War veterans remembered by name on the honor roll. Remember each of these men and the sacrifice they are leaving when they left the confines of home and family. Living day to day during the Civil War with an unknown future, worrying about his wife and children running the farm, disease to be dreaded as much as the enemy's bullets, not knowing if there was going to be an end to this war. There are 244 names in the Civil War Veterans books located at the Monson Museum. This includes men who enlisted from Monson area or men who were from Monson and enlisted from other towns or states. Also are veterans who were born and raised in another area but moved to Monson shortly after the war and spent the remainder of their days in Monson and are buried here. This honor roll lists 146 names of those enlisting from Monson, with 28 of them being wounded and 20 were either killed in action or died of disease. One of those men is Albert Chapin, who today would be very, very pleased with this new honor roll for many reasons. Albert was born in Monson and joined Company E, 1st Maine Heavy Artillery, reaching the rank of lieutenant, later to become an officer in Company C of the 24th Colored Troops. He returned to Monson, where he became involved in the lumbering industry, slate mining, real estate. He served for 17 years as a selectman in Monson and was elected state senator in 1891. He joined many organizations in town and had an office in all of them. March 24, 1914, Albert died. In January of 1920, his wife Henrietta sold their large Main Street home to Fred Crane, leaving a 15-square-foot piece of land, which was given to the town, to erect a Civil War soldier's monument in memory of her husband Albert and his comrades. At the March 1921 town meeting, the offer was rejected. Fast forward to October of 1944. Henrietta died and willed to the town the remaining property in Monson, including a home, camp, and woodlot, with a request to again erect a memorial of some sort to Civil War veterans. Today, Albert and Henrietta are having their wishes realized. A small synopsis of a few of these soldiers. There were many father and son enlistments, such as Bradish B. Brown, who enlisted at the age of 40, and his 18-year-old son, Byron. Bradish died of disease. Father Samuel Goodwin enlisted at age 47 and survived the war. 4 of his sons also served. Dexter and George, who died of disease, Merritt was wounded, and Stenson was discharged with a disability. There were at least 8 who were POWs. Granville McKinney died at Andersonville Prison. Seth Roberts died after his release from the Belle Island Prison. Multiple sets of brothers served. Jesse Dean enlisted at the age of 44. Abel, age 43. Robert was age 40. Charles, 39, and Westbrook, 32. All the sons of Ebenezer and Jane Dean. 1 was wounded and 2 of them died. 11 members of the Stewart family served. Seth and Eliza Stewart had 6 sons enlist from either Monson, Pennsylvania, or Illinois. 1 was discharged with a disability, 1 wounded, and 1 was killed in action. Cousins John M. was killed at Petersburg. Mac died of disease. Moses was disabled with disease, and Edward died of his wounds. There was a family that gave a lot in service of their country. Each of the men and women on this memorial have a story to tell. The families have heartache in losing loved ones or the joy that a veteran returned. Many of those who served were scars in many ways other than bodily. Pause, remember, and honor these veterans. And just a little ad, since I have a captive group here. On June 11th at 10, the Daughters and Sons of Union Veterans will be holding a memorial service for Civil War veterans John M. Stewart and his brothers Flavel and John Jackson right here at the Churchyard Cemetery, which there are several Civil War veterans buried in the Churchyard Cemetery behind us. The Hebron Winds will provide music from the era, and our special guest will be Roger Stefani, a VA representative who helped get us 5 headstones for Monson Civil War veterans that did not have a headstone. I'd also like to introduce Peter Redmond as our guest. He is the department commander for the Sons of Union Veterans. Can you stand up, Peter? And our next presentation will be from Eric Boothroyd, who serves as Secretary and Treasurer of the Colonel Calvin Dowdy Camp, number 11, Sons of Union Veterans. He is a past commander of the Maine State Sons of Union Veterans and currently serves as the Department Secretary and Treasurer. Eric?
Thank you. On behalf of the Colonel Dowdy Camp 11, our Department Commander, Peter Redmond, and the Department of Maine, Sons of Union Veterans of the Civil War, I want to thank the Monson Veterans Memorial Committee, and particularly our own sister Tootie Bennett and brother Wayne Bennett, for their dedicated work in making this memorial come to fruition. It is fitting on Memorial Day that we are reminded of the many on honor rolls like this across the nation with names who served across our country. But it is important to remember that behind each name is a story of a life lived and sometimes lost. Tootie alluded to some of these already, but I would like to go a little deeper with a couple of names. Sylvanus B. Stewart was born in 1831 in Bloomfield, Maine, a village on the west bank of the Kennebec River that no longer exists, but is now part of Skowhegan. In 1850, the 11-member Stewart family had relocated to Monson, where 17-year-old Sylvanus was listed as a farmer, along with his father and two of his brothers. Interestingly, Sylvanus was the only one of his siblings over the age of 6 that did not attend school that year. As the war years approached, Sylvanus was running the family farm with his younger brother, Asa, as their father was now in his 60s. Within 2 months after the fall of Fort Sumter in the spring of 1861, the single 29-year-old from Monson enlisted as a private in the 6th Maine Infantry Regiment, Company H. The regiment served in and around Washington, D.C. during the first year of the war. But their first real experience of battle came during McClellan's Peninsula Campaign starting in April of 1862. Private Stewart was wounded at the Battle of Gaines Mill, Virginia, in a rare nighttime assault on June 27, 1862. He continued with this regiment until the end of his original enlistment period in December 1863, and he re-enlisted into the 7th Maine Infantry, Veteran Company D. And after 8 months of service there, Stewart transferred to the newly formed 1st Veteran Infantry Veteran Volunteers and was mustered out as a corporal on June 28, 1865. Sylvanus Stewart spent 4 years and 2 months in continuous service to his country. After the war, Sylvanus returned to Monson to resume running the family farm. His father had died in 1862 while Sylvanus was away. 3 of his brothers had moved to other parts of the country, and his remaining siblings resided in Monson with their own families. So this left the farm and their mother in the care of Sylvanus and brother Asa. Asa got married in 1871, and by 1880 we find that Sylvanus was a lone farmer in the town of Howard, which is now Willimantic. He never did marry. In the same year, he also filed for an invalid pension. By 1900, at the age of 68, Sylvanus was a boarder in the home of his sister Hannah Prescott in Monson, but his final days were spent in Willimantic at the home of his nephew, Harry Prescott, where he died on November 23, 1906. He is buried in the Stewart family plot in Hillside Cemetery. Aside from his war years, it appears that Sylvanus Stewart led a simple, solitary, rural life, but in his twilight years, he could count on the support of his close family. Another veteran with a nearly parallel military record was Ira P. Wing. This 19-year-old also enlisted as a private in the 6th Maine Infantry in July of 1861. He was promoted to corporal, then sergeant, re-enlisted in the 7th Maine as a second lieutenant, and, like Stewart, transferred into the 1st Maine Infantry Veteran Volunteers, where he mustered out as a first lieutenant in February of 1865 after 3 years and 7 months of service. 1 month later, he married and began raising a family while practicing agriculture. In his later years and on into his old age, Ira worked as a machinist in the slate quarries. He died on New Year's Day, 1925, at the age of 83. Ira Wing is also buried in Hillside Cemetery. His life was important to our organization in that he became a comrade of the Grand Army of the Republic, or GAR, the largest of the Union veterans organizations, and served as post commander of the Gary Post No. 5 here in Monson. His son, Harry, joined what was then known as the Sons of Veterans USA, by virtue of his father's service, and was a member and past commander of W.L. Sampson Camp 17 in Monson. Harry Wing served as the 59th Department Commander of the Department of Maine Sons of Union Veterans of the Civil War in 1939. May the names on this monument spark an interest in seeking out the many stories of these Monson residents, perhaps some a recent or distant relative of yours, so that their memory will be preserved and this memorial will have achieved its purpose.
Well, as many of you probably remember, several years ago, especially during the 50s and 60s, there was a resident of Monson that always read the Gettysburg Address, and I'm sure many of you remember when Harry Davis used to read the Gettysburg Address. Today, I'd like to introduce Monson native Tom Allen, who graduated in 1994, returns to Monson Lakeshore Camp as often as possible, and was a former member of the 20th Maine Reenacting Group. Listen carefully as Tom recites this still powerful Gettysburg Address.
Greetings, fellow Monson residents, friends, and visitors. When I was asked this year to recite the Gettysburg Address today, I was honored, and I immediately started thinking of it like a theatrical performance. I even went so far as to order an Abraham Lincoln costume. But then an interesting thing happened. When I began to relearn the lines, if you will, the actual speech, I found not an outdated monologue from an old play, dusty and irrelevant, but rather a speech so important and so relevant to the very moment in which we live, so vitally important to our present, that I could not treat it like a play. So today, no costume, no stovepipe hat. Instead, I would ask each of you to listen to these words and to hear them like I have in a very different way than maybe you have in the past. I ask you to think of the struggle to which Lincoln refers not as the military struggle of the Civil War, but instead as the very present and ongoing struggle for true equality and democracy in which we are all engaged today. And I ask you to hear the call to action in these words, uttered all those years ago, as being spoken to you right here and right now. 12 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all people are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation, or any nation so conceived and so dedicated, can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave people, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work for which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be dedicated here to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from the earth.
Now I would like to bring up the commander of the town Holmboehm Legion Post, Jim Greenleaf.
all going to luck out a lot today because I don't have any prepared remarks. I don't, so it'll be a very short time up here. I just am really honored to see and be part of the ceremony that puts a new honor roll in Monson. When I was a kid, they had an honor roll down in the middle of town, and we used to stop and stare at those names and felt proud that we knew most of the people that were on that honor roll. And now they've redone their honor roll and made it 100 times better than the old one. And I really appreciate the effort these people have done to make this reality. The biggest reason for being here is to introduce the state commander of the American Legion, Deb Kuchin. And Deb will have some words for you that will be more fitting on Memorial Day than I could. So Deb?
This is actually one podium I can see over the top of. Usually I can't. So this is great. It's just my height. First of all, I'm very honored to be asked to be here today as you dedicate this beautiful monument. We actually drove by a few weeks back. It wasn't in the ground yet, so I knew exactly where we were headed today. I've learned a lot about Monson, beautiful town on Lake Hebron, and most of it I've learned about from Jim Greenleaf from Post 116 here in Monson, talking with Don McPherson Allen, and reading about your town online. And there's a lot of stories online. It's very, very interesting. You're mentioned in Henry David Thoreau's book, The Maine Woods, and I am curious about the deer antlers. It says it directs people to the towns of Abbott and to Monson, so I may be looking to find wherever those are located now before we leave. And also that John F. Kennedy's headstone is made from Monson slate. So Monson has a wonderful 200-year history, and I congratulate you on this monument and all the names that you have engraved on it. I'm sure that it's been a labor of love in finding all the names. I've heard the stories about all the research that's been done to find all of your Civil War heroes. And you've researched your history, and you've been inclusive of all who have served. A veteran is not just someone who served on the battlefield, on board a ship, or flying an F-16. A veteran is also someone who serves our country from the home front, where they support all and are prepared to deploy at a moment's notice. On this Memorial Day and always, may we remember and never forget all who have made the ultimate sacrifice. Freedom is not free. Thank you for recognizing all your veterans on this monument. And be safe and stay well, and may God bless you all. Thank you.
I gotta have this back up. I can't move it. In addition to the memorial, we have an absolutely beautiful new flagpole, which was just put in a couple weeks ago. And we need to thank Glenn and Molly Poole. It is their gift to the town. We also have, over on this side, a beautiful piece of Monson, Maine slate with an inscription on it that you need to take time to come up and look at after the service, and that is a gift from John Tatko. There are no words other than a humble thank you to these people for adding to this new memorial. And then every group has to have the keeper of the lists. Glenn Poole is a master of the keeper of the lists. He keeps the Monson Historical Society list, he keeps the Monson Alumni Association list, and he keeps the list of all the donors that made this monument possible. Glenn Poole.
Thanks, Dawn. I want to read what's on the plaque in back of me, and it was written by my wife Molly, who's sitting, oh no, she's not sitting beside me, she's out there. So it says, this Veterans Memorial was erected and dedicated on May 30th, 2022 by the town of Monson in honor of and with the deepest gratitude to the men and women who took an oath and honored their pledge to the United States of America, regardless of the cost he or she and their families may have to bear, to preserve and protect our constitutional rights and freedoms. When we started this project 3 years ago and started adding up what it would cost, it seemed like an impossible task. We learned that we would need to get close to $35,000. And if you have your program, you'll see a list of donors on the back of the program. Well over 100 donors, and we've collected at least 35,000. So I can't tell you enough how much that's appreciated. People really stepped up and donated for this memorial. So thank you very much. Don mentioned I'm the list keeper, and so I would change the list as Tootie and Wayne kept feeding me veterans' names, and you just can't even imagine the hours and hours and hours spent by those two doing research, and not because they're slow. Tootie is a master researcher, and that's an understatement. And the Veterans Memorial Committee wants to recognize both of them and thank them very much. Another project that we're working on is right behind us. Tootie mentioned there are several Civil War veterans buried in the old churchyard cemetery. It had been neglected for years, and over the past 2 years, we've made great improvements using Maine gravesite maintenance. They've been working on it for the last 3 weeks, I think. And take a trip into the cemetery and take a look at what it looks like now. So they've done an excellent job. And thanks to the American Legion, and I think after the ceremony they'll be serving some food up by the bandstand. Thank you very much.
I also want to recognize the Foxcroft Academy Band. Josh Guthrie, their leader, has been fabulous. Usually Monson has an 8 o'clock parade so they can get down and do Dover, but in this bicentennial year, Josh turned everything around so that the kids could be here to play for us. So thank you very much to the Foxcroft Band. And now is the moment we've been waiting for, the unveiling of our brand new Veterans Memorial. So 2 of the members of the committee who are veterans, William Emanuelson and Dick Marshall, will unveil our monument. We, the citizens and friends of Monson, dedicate this Monson Veterans Memorial to the great-grandfathers, the grandmothers and grandfathers, the mothers and fathers, sons and daughters who have left our little hamlet to fight in wars from the Spanish-American War to the Great Civil War to the 2 World Wars and through Vietnam, the Gulf Wars, Afghanistan, and all the other places that they have been sent. We also dedicate this monument to those who served, always at the ready to be sent to war, whether they were deployed or not. With each name engraved on this monument, there is a story, and those stories are our history. To those, we owe our freedom and our gratitude.